Hi, everybody. This is Kathy L. Murphy, the Pulpwood Queen, and I am here tonight for our first book club online meeting of the year for the International Pulpwood Queens and Timber Guys Book Club. And I'm so excited because this is also our first book as the Director of Acquisitions for Lucid House Publishing. And I have our publisher here tonight, Echo Garrett, and her co-publisher, Connor Garrett. And this is a book family affair because we have Connor Garrett, Connor Judson Garrett, and Kevin N. Garrett, who are the authors of our very first book, Spellbound Under the Spanish Moss, A Tale of Southern Magic. And with us is also another Lucid House Publishing author, Douglas Thompson. So he's going to be helping me during our 2021 Pulpwood Queen Girlfriend Weekend Author Extravaganza Zoomathon Girlfriend Weekend Book Club Convention as an administrator. So I'm thankful that I've drug you into the crazy and wonderful world of the Pulpwood Queens. So tonight, Spellbound Under the Spanish Moss. We are so excited about this first in the Spellbound series. So who wants to begin? Connor, Kevin?
Dad, you want to kick it off?
You're already there, Connor. Take it and run, buddy.
Passing the buck.
Well, so Spellbound Under the Spanish Moss was a kind of a book that we decided to write because we were inspired years ago by the movie Big Fish, actually. And I think the seed was kind of started from there, and we just felt like this was a story that had to happen. Now, it took us, I think, years where we actually hadn't even begun the writing process. The idea was just kind of beginning to grow. But I think we had different feelings about things where, we'd seen Big Fish. We saw the father-son narrative in there, which is a really significant part of our story. And I think even the evolution of our relationship as a father and a son, working through our own creative journeys and our own spiritual and emotional and mental journeys, I think that's kind of how things coalesced and started to really form this book here. So Dad, would you like to add on to that start?
Absolutely. Yeah, this was a labor of love. We had long sought to collaborate. We've made art together before, and we've read for each other things that we've written. But I think it had been a long-held dream of ours that we would create a book together one day. And as Connor was packing up to go overseas to Lebanon, we had a list. He had a list of 10 ideas, and he said, "Which one do you think that I should get after?" And I picked the one. I said, "There was a Southern book that you started to work on," and I said, "And I had done the same thing years ago, and just wrote it until I wrote it into the ground and dropped it, and then I did the same thing again." And Connor had kind of written himself into a hole, and we just started day after day working together using WhatsApp to collaborate. And in the end, we ended up with a book. And I was talking to Connor earlier this afternoon, and I just said, out of the last 5 years of my life, I think this is the project that I'm most proud of. So I'm very thankful to Connor, and very thankful to you, Kathy, for having us on this evening. We have a little bit of time to talk.
I'm just thankful for this book family. And I have to tell you, the wonderful thing about the first book that you do is it's got to be magic for me. And this book is the perfect read aloud for any family, especially during this time of COVID where we're all social distancing. I am thrilled about it. I was rereading parts of it today, and it begins with a very epic and very memorable scene that I actually, when I was announcing the books in a previous show, I read your first chapter of your book, because what I want to know, and do you have the book where one of you could maybe read that first chapter? That would be awesome. Do you have it with you?
I do.
All right. Go ahead, Kevin.
All right. The wisest thing Gareth Grayfin's father Samuel did for his son was to throw him in the shallows of the sea and let the boy believe he was in the deep. Gareth thrashed and panicked until his feet touched the sandy bottom. The boy stood shivering, not with the cold, but with the sheer terror with his head above the gently ebbing tide. Fear drowns more men than water, his father told him. You can feel it, but don't let it choke you. The father and son spent their days side by side sailing Freya, a 30-foot-long ketch sailboat up and down the Savannah and Ogeechee rivers and along the coast to Tybee Island to the other Golden Isles, where they could anchor their vessel and fish. If Samuel and Garrett had a day of abundance and their nets were full, they would go into town with the cobblestone streets and fine mansions, Victorian buildings, and neat tree-lined squares and sell the excess of their catch. Samuel spent most of the money on more fishing supplies, hooks, stronger line, upgrades for the two-mast boat. But any meager amount that he had to spare, the father put away for his son. Garrett may have been the most fearful boy in the South, spooked by his own reflection in the water, scared of his own shadow on the land. Being brave isn't being unafraid, his father said. Being brave is being terrified of something and doing it simply because it's the right thing to do. Have you ever been afraid? Of course, he said. When your mother died, I had to raise you, my perfect, beautiful baby boy, all by myself. I had no idea how to be a father. And I'll tell you a secret. Every adult was a kid once and is just learning how to be a parent along the way. That's a scary thought, huh? Have you ever cried? Yes, he said. When your mother and I met, my eyes were the blue of a robin's egg. The son studied his father's pale gray irises. When she got the fever and passed, I cried every day until the tears washed the color from my eyes. But I feel her in the wind, and I see her in the stars, pushing us, guiding us, and sending her light. Does she talk? She tells me how much she loves you and how proud of you she is. Is she proud of me even when I'm afraid? Yes, always, even then. The boy had come to feel his mother was in some way part of their journey. The wind was her breath, her song, her whisperings. Although Garrett had no memory of his mother, his father's stories brought her to life for him. He could see her wavy red hair blowing in the breeze, her smile, her penchant for stopping to pick flowers and seashells from the ground, her walking barefoot by the sea. The lilac dress she wore when she slipped out of her house for a moonlit walk with Samuel. The pearls his father collected from the oyster beds and fashioned into a necklace for her. The way her eyes lit up like sapphires when her father told her about the places they would sail someday. Every night on the shore, under the stars and among the driftwood on the beach, Garrett would ask for another story about his mother. Sometimes the same story told again and again to the rhythm of the lapping water. His mother often visited him in his dreams. Other nights she would come as a light to dispel the phantoms of his night terrors. When Garrett was still a boy, Samuel would tell him about the wider world where his son couldn't sleep. The elder Grayfin was full of fantastical stories about the riddle-giving goat in the grove, river nymphs, the treacherous Blackwater swamp, the pirates who used to roam the coast and the Golden Isles and voyage to the Caribbean, the ghosts of the Confederate and Union soldiers trying to make their way home, the old money vampires who thrived in the upper echelons of Savannah, the African slaves who were forced to the region, the Indians who were forced out, and a girl with powers so great the townfolk chased her into the woods for fear of her sorcery. The story about the girl especially fascinated the boy. He marveled at this girl's strength and wondered what it must be like to be so powerful at a young age when he was afraid of his own shadow. More nights than he could count, Garrett would finally drift off, listening to his father's deep, gravelly voice and comforted by the soothing touch of his father's tenderly stroking his hair. As Garrett got older, he came to believe his father's tales had been embellished, if not fabricated entirely, as any sane and experienced individual would. What he couldn't have known was that all of Samuel Grayfin's stories were true, except one.
It's a great beginning. The power of the story. What I also want to bring into the conversation is, first of all, this year it's been even more important to me to tell the listening audience that we try to pick stories that enlighten, that educate, that entertain, that are globally diverse, and that fit a wider audience than we've ever had before. We're really working on that. I think your book, it has began with that, because the first book in your series is set in Savannah, which is one of the magical places in the world. I mean, my good friend John Barron, who wrote Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, I just couldn't wait to get to Savannah after reading that book. And that's why when I put the post up about your book, I said, who wants to go to Savannah? Because wouldn't it be great to go to these places that you and Connor went to when you were in the area and while you were working on this book project together? But let's tell our listening audience too where you are today, as we're doing this Zoom meeting. Isn't technology wonderful? Because let's begin with you, Connor. Tell everybody where you're coming in from.
Yeah, so currently I'm in Byblos, Lebanon, which is the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. It's very, very an interesting place. So you have Egyptian influence, because the word Byblos actually comes from the papyrus trade, which was huge between Byblos and Egypt. You have what else? You have large Phoenician influence, Roman influence actually, and a couple other things. The Ammonites, Amorites actually, sorry, Amorites. But it's a very historical place. Oh, and then you also have what's the Ottoman Empire as well. So you have a whole mix of architecture, and you have the citadel, the famous citadel there. You have the the necropolis, and a couple others. So it's just, I like the city a lot. So when I knew I was going to be back in Lebanon, I knew specifically that Byblos was the place to be. So that's just a little about the current state of things. And then, yeah.
And Kevin, where are you reporting in from?
Well, I'm in Missoula, Montana tonight, Kathy. And,
a wide variety of places. Yes.
Boy, I would say so. We're in the fourth largest state of the United States and the fourth least populated. And I'm out here visiting Connor's older brother, Caleb, who's a storyteller himself and a professional fly fishing guide. And during my time out here, we've tracked a wolf pack as they were on the hunt of an elk. I've seen coyotes and bobcat and a golden eagle and eagles and it's been amazing, and a lot of snow too.
Man,
So,
I'm jealous.
Yeah.
And Echo, where are you reporting from? So you'll let everybody know.
I'm sitting in our house in Marietta, Georgia, at the table where we typically, when we're all together, we read whatever we're working on to each other. We help each other edit. We talk through storylines. This is sort of our gathering spot. It's in our eat-in kitchen. I've got a fire going over here, so it's very cozy.
That's great. Well, it's wonderful that you're in all these places. But what is interesting to me about your book, because you're a travel photographer, a pretty world famous travel photographer, and Connor, because you are working on all different writing projects, you had to put this book together and not be in the same place. Why don't you explain the process of that, of how you worked on this book together?
So I think the most important thing that we kind of understood from the beginning was that the best idea always wins, which is the same thing if you're going to start a business. Almost you can treat, if you're going to collaborate on anything, a book, a business, anything, the best idea has to win. You can't have ego about who it's coming from, and so I think for us it was really important that we kind of knew how we wanted to collaborate. So I think my dad has a particular talent for plot, and for specifically weaving threads together. So he's always been a big fan of the Bourne Supremacy, the Bourne Identity, the Bourne trilogy. I suppose it's a trilogy. He's been a big fan of those books, and I think that's actually significant because they do a really good job of weaving a lot of threads together. And so even though it's a completely different genre, I think that there are patterns, and that's what you're looking for. Creativity is a lot more analytical than people think. So really he's looking at patterns and is using those types of patterns to weave things together. My case, from kind of a, a late blooming poetry background, and just, I think, liking to paint with words. I think that's really where we fit together. And we kind of knew that coming in. It's like, okay, you have directors, you have actors. It's the same thing with kind of any craft. And so we had specific roles that we wanted to occupy going into it, and that's sort of roughly how we did it. So
it's hard to imagine. And you used a new platform that I wasn't familiar with. This old cat is learning new tricks in technology, but you did this through, what was the app again?
Google Docs.
WhatsApp
What?
and
Yeah,
Google,
there you go. I've got to check
Google
this out.
Docs. Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing, because it's hard enough to work on a book, from your home, but to be you guys doing it with you traveling and working together. But you have a pretty good schedule of, you get together the same time every day. Is that correct?
Yes,
That's correct.
You kind of have to if you want to get the book done. And so I know that, I'm not going to give anything away on this book, because it's one of these books that you're going to fall in love with the characters. And this book has a lot of sub stories. We've got a lot of different people that have a lot of different attributes that are a little bit different than most book characters. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the characters that you have in your book?
Sure. I think Wally is a fun place to start. I mean, that was a character that, my dad actually wrote a little bit about today. Because I think Wally, like all your best and favorite characters, he represents the good and the bad. I think he's more textured, and that's what people are in real life. You can have, the seemingly best person in the world, and there may be some edgy qualities to them deep down, and then vice versa. You could have someone that, seems like maybe not the best person. They can surprise you every now and then. And so I feel like in Wally's case, that's one of the things that makes him so interesting, is that I don't know if we'd say necessarily that he's unpredictable, but he's certainly eccentric. And I think that's something that's really special about Wally. So he was sort of a conglomerate of a lot of people that we've known over the years. So we've known people that are, and I don't mean that they spin tales in real life, and that's not a bad thing. Whatever livens up your world, go for it. And then we've known people that can be shady in some areas, but have a million redeeming qualities. And so we sort of merged a lot of these people that we know together. And I think Wally was sort of born from that. And personally, I like the idea of creating sort of a messed up Messiah in a way. And obviously not to give anything away, but Wally has some very redeeming moments in there. And yeah, just having a flawed Messiah, because even growing up from a religious background as a kid, one of the things that I found really difficult was that you're told, and this is not, make this as secular as you want, but you're told, for instance, to be like Jesus. And as a even 5-year-old hearing that, you take that literally. And in my case, that meant, trying to be as great or as perfect. That, that's how I interpreted it. And that's a very difficult mark when you misinterpret it and misunderstand the heart of what's being said there, when you go in a literal direction with it. So I think Wally is sort of an answer to that, even in a way. Wally's just the person doing the best that he can, which I think sometimes that's honestly what you need in life. You need an aspirational character like that, like Claire would appreciate this, like Jeff Bridges' character in the Big Lebowski. That's, you're just kind of being the dude. Sometimes that is your best. So
that's a good one. I liked him in True Grit. I thought he was.
Yeah. Oh my God, he's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And his music is awesome too.
Kevin, you want to talk about another one of the characters, or one of your favorites?
Well, I mean, I can talk about how we came up with the father and the son, Samuel and Garrett. People have asked us, it's like, is that reflective of your relationship with Connor? And I go, absolutely not. It's like Connor and I created this together. But really, to get to the core of Garrett, I had to think back about my relationship with my father, that, I was that miserable teenager, and, wish that I could have talked to my dad later and said, thank you. I know there were a lot of things that you tried to teach me and help me with. But I mean, I think that I wrote Garrett's character, just based on my teenager miserableness of, years ago. And then, we sort of, Connor wrote Samuel, and it goes, it's more of an ideal father, trying to teach and love and protect, and maybe overly so. But we came to that. But one thing I did want to mention, you mentioned earlier, that we had that daily accountability as we created this book. We were using Google Docs and we were using WhatsApp, and we had a meeting every morning that we never failed to make.
Right.
And I think that's important because when I wrote my book earlier, I didn't have accountability. It was just like one day, someday I'm going to do this. And because I felt a responsibility to show up each morning at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning and be on the phone with Connor, I was sitting there in my desk with a cup of coffee and ideas that I hoped would move the book. And then Connor would do the same thing. And then we would sit and talk and debate about the characters' motives and what would move them and why would they do this. And before we moved on with it, it needed to be something that we both believed. And that helped us, I believe, get to the truth of the characters and get through the book, by being deliberate and by being daily with it.
Well, this year, I think this writing process is very interesting, especially to authors, because we've had father and son like you. We've had two friends that wrote a book on grandparenting. And I'm thinking, how do you do that? And then we had the Best Friends Book Club, which is now the Pulpwood Queens of New Jersey, all write a book together, Novel Women. That, to me, it's hard enough to get my stuff down. I can't even imagine collaborating with one person, let alone 4 more other people. But I think authors need to hear the process and how that works. So we're really excited about it. I'm really wanting to talk about your next book, and I know you've got another one that's in the queue. And this is a book that's going to be taking us out of the country. And so can you just give us a little tease of where we're going with the Spellbound series?
Gladly.
Okay.
Yeah. So book 2, book 1 hints at some possible direction of where book 2 could go, without saying too much, spoiler alert. So with that being said, the second book ends up in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, obviously in recent years, it's kind of been in the news for devastation from hurricanes. But if you look at Puerto Rico, it's a really stunning island. There's a ton of beauty there, both natural and man-made. Obviously being largely influenced by the Spanish, you have, the old fortress walls and everything around Old San Juan. Old San Juan, I think, besides Mexico City, is the oldest. It's the oldest city in the Western Hemisphere that's still standing around. I mean, it's been around since the 1500s, and it's just a really stunning place. In fact, Ponce de Leon is buried in one of the main cathedrals there in San Juan. Mm-hmm. So you already right there have some mythology when you look at the Fountain of Youth and just some other things going on there. But then on top of that, then Puerto Rico, when you start looking, it has a lot of myths already kind of built into their beliefs. And so whether it's their kind of twist on ghosts called Hupia, or whether it's their different myths like Salome and Abacoa, which is like a love story. There's a lot of, I noticed there's a tendency in Puerto Rican myth of like lost love. So I think there's some interesting things going on that sort of are going to parallel that in book 2, where sorry, hey Mandy, popped up on the main. Hey. Yes, there's some interesting stuff I think that happens where there's some parallels to it, and it really centrals around a perfumer, though. Book 2 does. So some of the main characters from book 1 do make large appearances, and they are very much important and critical to book 2, but it's almost, while it's a sequel, it's almost more of a sister or a brother book. And I'm actually that kind of description from John J. Pearson, who illustrated the cover on the first book. After reading
Beautiful.
it,
The
that was
cover. Oh, outstanding job, both back and, the back and the front. And for those listening out there, the illustrations, even on the inside, are just incredible. And it also, as an artist, I really appreciate, I like novels with pictures. I do. And so I really appreciate that you've added some beautiful illustrations. And where's this artist out of? Where is he from?
He's based in Leeds, England, and he does a lot of work for different comic companies, graphic novel companies. I mean, and it's just the nicest guy ever. Super easy to work with. I don't even really know the guy too well, and he's like one of my favorite people. I just like the vibe.
Is he going to be doing all the covers for the Spellbound series?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And
Yes.
about how he can help us with book 3, so book 3 is so okay, so I'll stick on book 2, but I'll just quickly say book 3 is
it's okay. We want people excited about your series.
Book 3 is really where the creativity is fully unleashed. Like, there's a particular thing that I've been wanting to do since I was 16 with my writing that I feel like I'm finally kind of getting to fully do in book 3. This has been my true dream since I was about 16. So it's over a decade in the making, and just very excited about that. But he's probably going to end up doing some guidebooks and things like that, where he'll be sort of creating different illustrations to go along with a lot of the invented things that are going to be in book 3. Again, it's the most imaginative, and it is in a I don't know, parallel universe probably isn't the right word, but there's 2 sort of spaces that the book 3 will take place in. It'll be in the Underlands. That's a working, but that may be the final name, but the Underlands, and then also partly set in New Orleans as well. So it's funny because we almost have a little bit of a triangle there, but all very magical and historic locations. So,
well, after a year of sitting in my home, my 1,000 square foot little cabin in the woods, Murphy's Law, armchair traveling through all these reads, all I can say is that when we get these done, let's go to these places and do the book walk. I mean, anybody listening to this, because this will be recorded, put on YouTube, I want to go because I've never been to Puerto Rico. I've been to Savannah. I've been to New Orleans many, many times, but keep setting them in these fabulous places so we can all go there. Literary tours are my forte, and the Pulpwood Queens have been on many, many of them. So future, hope this happens. So guys, you've got the second book done, right? So it's in the queue. You're working on the third book. How far do you think this series may go?
So that's another thing we've kind of talked about is, when we wrote book 1, I mean, we both were kind of like, well, it's a standalone book. It's done, it's done. There was no plan for book 2, but we just kind of realized that there was definitely a book 2 there. We intentionally left book 1 open for a book 2, but it was kind of modeled after Big Fish in a lot of ways. And so it wasn't necessarily meant to be a large creative property per se. It was just meant to be a story, something that people would feel and they'd understand and relate to. And then, with the second book though, that was where it was kind of like, okay, second book is kind of obvious that this needs to be here. So we started working on that. And pretty early on in the second book, it was clear that there was going to be a third. But the third, because of how expansive it is, it could be 2 separate books. It could be one pretty large book relative to the size of the other 2, because they're scaling up. So the first one is not a long book. It's like about 100 pages. Second book's about 200 pages. The third book will be, quite a bit larger. But they were almost pulling a Fibonacci sequence where it's like, okay, you start here and then go a little larger. But we're pretty excited about this, and it's really growing. And even some of the characters, like our illustrator, he even mentioned one character in book 2 called the Boatman, who's like, dude, I got so fascinated. And of course, he says it in this cool Leeds accent, which I won't try to do here because I'll butcher it. But he was talking basically about how he could see the Boatman having his own spin-off book. Now, I don't think that's the direction that we're necessarily going to explore, but I have a partner over here, so he may want to go with it, and we may just, we may years down the line pull that one off too, but at least 3 books, but it may be 4, and there's a way of continuing on past that if we decided to explore some more there. We could even go back in time. There's a lot of threads here that we could follow. It just sort of, we talk about this a lot. Ideas scarcity. We don't really believe in that. I think, we don't really believe in writer's block. Honestly, I think
I don't believe in it. I don't believe in it either.
No, it just, sometimes you just have to sit. You have to sit idle for a little longer. You just have to sit and just be a little more stubborn. But you can't call it writer's block. The moment that you do, you're dead in the water. So
I also feel, and I want to know about what you think about this, is that most of the thought process that goes into a book is spending that time just in your head.
Yep.
I mean, I've literally spent years working on this novel in my head. I know exactly how I want it to play out, and it's just finding the time to get it down. How much of this has been spent just, coming up with these ideas first, talking about it before you, I think getting it down on paper, it's after all this time spent in your head. Does that make sense?
It does. So the only reason why personally I get that, and I think my mom's that way. My mom, and I think some of that has to do with how your brain in particular is wired. I think, and we've talked about this before. I've always prefaced a lot of these calls with, I have terrible ADHD in case I wander off into somewhere else and I completely lose thought. So I do that very deliberately. So I don't, wind up embarrassing us all. But oh my God, and it just happened right now. That was like a change. Oh my God.
It's okay, because the other thing I want to bring up that I think is probably something you may not have even thought about, but the fact that a father and son are meeting every day at you guys' ages in a time where we have disconnected as community and been distanced from one another, I think you're setting an example for men. Because oftentimes when, sons grow and everything, there's a disconnect. But the fact that you guys recognize the importance of storytelling and you're working together, how many books can we think about, whether it's father, son, or mother, daughter, or father, daughter, mother, son? I think that is a legacy that your family is creating for the future of a family of storytellers. Because I know Echo and I have talked about her family, the songwriting influence, the storytelling through song, how that has carried on into her life in her world of publishing. Is there anything you want to say about that, Echo? I mean, I hate to put you on the spot, but I think it's important to know why this family has decided to start in this time, this publishing company that is creating books that share the importance of storytelling.
Well, my late father, Bob Montgomery, started out as a young teenager as partners with Buddy Holly, and they loved writing songs together. And even when Buddy went on and started the Crickets, Dad decided to concentrate on songwriting and producing. But what hardly anybody knows is shortly before Buddy was killed in the plane crash, he and my father had decided that they were going to start a publishing company together.
I get chills.
Yeah. and because they realized that that was what was going to give them creative control and a truly have their vision go forth. And so that obviously didn't happen. But years later, several years later, Dad did start a company. It was called House of Gold Music. And he had, because he'd been a songwriter himself, he had tremendous respect for, he understood the process. He understood how important each song that you write, that you create, is to the creative person who's behind that song. And he put so much passion and so much energy into each of those people who were lucky enough to be on his roster. He had 25, at the time he sold the company to Warner Communications, he had 25 staff songwriters. And we really were like a family. And I say that because Kevin and I actually both worked for my dad when we graduated from Auburn University. And so I got to see somebody who treated other people with tremendous integrity and care. And so, and then our whole growing up together in our family, in the family I have now, we were all artists and we all have this desire to create. And so we've just, and I have to say, watching, I intentionally stayed back from their creative process because although I'm a writer myself and I've also been an editor, I didn't want to be involved until they had pretty much hammered everything out themselves. And I wanted to be able to come to look, they had asked me to edit the book once they'd finished their process. And I wanted to come to it with fresh eyes. One of the other people, ironically, that we did bring in was our son, Caleb, to read it as well, because he is a fisherman for a living. And the two of the main characters, that's what they do for a living. So it really was a family affair. But this working on this book was such a gift during the pandemic, because they were still working on it when the pandemic hit. And it really helped me keep my sanity and have something very positive to focus on. I couldn't wait. I treated it like a gift that I couldn't wait to peel the wrapping back on, because I just wanted to know what, just like all the readers who read this book, I wanted to know what was going to happen to the characters. And but it was so fun, and it was very unexpected in some ways. Like, I think when people read the book, there's a couple of characters who will really surprise people. And I was impressed that they chose to there's really strong female characters, not only in this book, but in this next book as well, that people are going to just love. They're going to fall in love with these characters. So,
well, it's an incredible story. And then, Kevin brings in he's storytelling through taking photographs. And as I'm also an artist, so when he came traveling through, because he stopped and took pictures of me, and I've met Kevin on, I think, a couple occasions, but never really knew him. And I spent the day with him. And I just realized after that day, I'm the luckiest person in the world. I'm just going to tell you right now, because I don't know anybody that has been luckier than me during COVID, because to get a job offer of director of acquisitions during COVID is like I don't know how it happened. It's just a miracle to me. But I have never been more excited about working on this publishing house and with all the authors that are coming on board with us. And it's such a unique publishing house because 90% of the profits are going to the talent. And when I tell authors this, they look at me like, what are you saying? It's the exact opposite of everything that's happening in the big five or big four, whatever it's streamlining down to in New York City. And the amount of attention that we give to each one of our authors is so unlike anything that I've experienced, because I was published by one of the big five authors. And 6 weeks, you're done. Bye, see ya. We're not going to be that way. We're investing in our authors. And I am so excited that you guys are the first ones out of the chute. And I see big things from all of this. And the one thing about this life, it's short. And we're still here. And the fact that everybody on this page is all doing such good work, and we're working all together to show that good stories and putting great stories in the hands of readers is what makes us more kind, more civil, have more empathy, more understanding. So I'm just thrilled about tonight, because I've just been kind of jumping up and down every time it was Kevin's birthday yesterday. Yay, happy birthday. And
Thank you.
It's really, you guys, it's a privilege and an honor to be a part of this. So we're on this path and journey together. And we've got this big annual conference coming up, which I'm very excited about. And I know that everybody here is going to be a major part of that. But I also, I just want you to talk, each one of you, Kevin, Connor, about what your dream is for this coming, not just year, but coming for the future time that we're all working together. What do you have in your mind's eye as the goals for everything?
Well, think fast. Here we go. I think my goal is to keep going with more of what we've already got. I mean, I'm just thrilled to have Connor as a writing partner and creative partner, and it just it's just I don't know, another facet of our relationship together. I mean, whether we're in town together or whether he's in Lebanon and I'm East Coast or West Coast or wherever I go for my work, we're in touch and we talk every single day. So this is a gift to my life. Awesome. An enhancement to our friendship, and to get to tell a story together and dream and see our dreams come to life, and to be able to hold a copy of the book. Oh my gosh, man.
I know. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. And
I hope you're framing it and putting it in your house.
Yeah. Yeah. So that and also the fact that it's a publishing company that's run by Connor and Echo and you and Jawad. I think that's a gift also, just to have a little more control over things, and to be able to guide it and steer it, and be in control of its destiny. Yeah,
it's really great. We've got many more books coming up. We've got several that are out, but could we stop for just a minute and talk about the project of these classics we're coming out with? Because all of us are big readers, and it was so exciting to me when I was talking to Connor about the classics that he wanted to bring out and have new illustrations so that young people could discover them. And I always know when I went to the library, I'd always look for the newest book, because I was attracted to the covers. And The Prophet and The Great Gatsby, the ones that you've got coming out, have great covers. Can we just talk about that a little bit, about the direction that we want to go with this new series?
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the beautiful things is that all the books that go from, I think, 1925 and back are public domain now. So that means that anyone can publish them, but you want to come out with your own twist. So what we've done, for instance, with The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, we actually went and John Jay, again, we got him to illustrate a beautiful cover, got him to do some great illustrations for the interior. And we added some review questions and things that will be good for the academic markets. And we've got that live on Amazon. So that was our first classic, which, I thought Kathy was maybe reaching for it.
I had it right here. Now I'm trying to figure out where I put it. Keep going.
Then our second one that's live is actually the Book of Five Rings, which was written by, sometimes I struggle with the first name. I think it was Miyamoto Musashi, I believe. And this was Japan's most famous samurai. He was, what's the word I'm looking for? It was like a not a Rogan, but now I'm coming to think of it, I almost wonder if that's where the word rogue comes from. But basically,
is it Connor? Are you looking for Ronin?
Ronin, yeah, that's it. And so what that actually is it's a samurai that, so for a few different reasons, they're traditionally almost considered disgraced. Like maybe their master was killed in battle or something else. It's almost like how at a certain point back in the day, being a widow could even be bad for you, as same it's almost like being widowed as a samurai. It's a funny thing. So anyways, that's the second book that we're putting out, and it's a shorter book, but some of the applications can be looked at for business and a lot of other things. It's kind of like a lesser known art of war, right? We're also soon going to have The Gift of Black Folk ready, but one of the challenges here is that since we're putting them out primarily as through Amazon, and love it or hate it, Amazon is where about 80% of the books are purchased through. So we're primarily focused there, but we do publish in other places. The Gift of Black Folk, part of the reason why we felt like it was important, especially now, is because we're really in a time where I think the conversation about what's equitable is an important thing. And no matter where you are on all this, I think it's good to understand perspectives. And so that's why we're putting the book of The Gift of Black Folk out, which is, in fact, I think this is going to be the first year that that's in public domain. So that was the other part of it, is that it's timely. And we're excited about that because it's a beautiful cover. Right now, we're just ironing out whether or not the review questions we have will be enough, or if we're going to need to add annotations or illustrations, what we're going to need to differentiate it. And then we're also putting out The Great Gatsby very soon. I'm very excited about our cover. We might brighten up the edges a little bit there, but The Great Gatsby's, it's actually going to be the first year that it's in public domain. One of Kathy's other dear authors wrote a book called Nick, which kind of explores Michael, I think his name is Michael Ferris Smith, something like that. Yeah. Is that right? He wrote Nick, which explores Nick Carraway's backstory. I think before Great Gatsby. I think it serves as a prequel, maybe. But anyway.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So what we're doing though on our cover, for instance, and this is, look, we're not secretive about anything here. So if you're a publisher listening to this, and you're looking to start doing public domain books, whatever you're trying to do here, we noticed that our differentiator here would be that a lot of the covers for The Great Gatsby that were already on Amazon were the blue traditional painting, which it's a beautiful painting and I love it. In fact, that's kind of what they did with Nick. They sort of did a twist on that. But we wanted to really feature the green light because early on, at least, that was a enormously important symbol, because I think the green light taps into one of the most powerful human emotions, and that's longing, to an extent, regret. These are all cousins, these different emotions here. And so we're really excited about The Great Gatsby specifically, and especially now where we're in a time that we can kind of maybe escape to, at that point in time, maybe a more happy 20s, a more extravagant 20s than we're living in currently right now, actually. It seems like we're regressing a little bit. So we're doing that. We're going to be putting out The Count of Monte Cristo, which is a larger book for us. So there's not really necessarily a particular niche for us when it comes to public domain books. We're kind of, frankly, publishing books that we just like something about them, you know? And so a lot of them do have a social or kind of an international ethical cause to them. But it's not strictly limited to that, right? It can be pure entertainment value. Like I think The Great Gatsby is just a combination of timeliness and entertainment value. So that maybe our goal is we're going to try to publish. I mean, if we can really iron out our process on the public domain books, we're going to try to publish. My goal is 50 for this coming year. I'd like to publish 50 of them, so about one per week, but not a lot of catching up to do. So,
great idea. Because at first I thought, oh, well, this is, I mean, my very first thought was, well, this book's already out. But like you said, for younger people with the new covers and, because they're missing out on all these great books that they don't even know they're missing out on. And now, yeah, so they'll catch their younger people's eye and, that's so cool.
Thank you. Well, and we're also hoping too that in a way, because we want our business model to be generous, not only fair, but also generous to the authors that we work with. And so in a way, we're hoping that we can possibly balance out some of the margin. So whereas these traditional publishers may be giving, may take 90% of the books and leave the author with 10, our model slipped. Well, it is tough to run a business like that, but we're going to figure out a way to do it. And so it may be that we make up on our margins through the public domain books, as an example, where we're keeping all of it, right, through the public domain books. This way we can give our best attention and intentions to our authors that we work with. So
that is a really good point, Connor, because, when I had my hair salon bookstore, it was the hair that brought in the cash for my bookstore. I didn't make that much money on book sales. When you order 1 and 2 copies at a time, you might make 10, 20%. So, but when you love something so much, like we all do, the storytelling, that is really important to share to people. And I also have always picked classics as part of the Pulpwood Queen 21 years of reading. I've made The Count of Monte Cristo a bonus book of the month because it's one of my favorite books of all time, and kids weren't reading it today. And if they get started on it, they can't put it down. There's so many books, and so as you were reading them off to me, I was going, yes. These are all books. Fitzgerald's one of my favorites. I am so ecstatic about the classic line, but I think you brought up a good point that will explain to people how do you make any money? That's what everybody wants to know. It's funny. They want to know how you make any money, but they also at the same time go, well, what are you going to do for me? So what we have to realize, it's got to be a balance of us helping each other. And if we all start working together, sharing the stories, getting great books out there to great people, and really see that this is a personal experience with this publishing house and our authors. We're investing in them as we're investing in Spellbound Under a Spanish Moss in this series. I can't wait to share them with the world, and they're doing very well. Everything that's coming out right now is done splendidly. So, and we think it'll even get better once we get this vaccine out to everybody. So, is there any words of advice for people who might be wanting to write a book or get into the book world, especially during this time when like 300,000 books are coming out a day? Is there anything that you want to share with our listening audience of advice on writing?
Absolutely. Yeah. The main thing would be do it. First off, do it, because I think it's easy to worry about the end result. Again, it's easy to worry about the end result, what's going to happen with it. And like you mentioned, you said there's 300,000 books every blah, blah, blah day. It's like, it's a saturated market. It is. If your focus is if you begin saying, okay, I'm going to make a lot of money at this, I think you're shooting yourself in the foot. But if you begin by saying, I'm going to write a really great story I'm going to write something I'm really passionate about, I believe that over time, everything will fall into place. Now, I say that I believe because, frankly, you know, I'm 27, so for me, I'm doing okay, and I'm getting there, but you know, haven't had my big one yet. But I can tell you that I've seen how things are scaling, right? And so I'm just saying that I'm positive that if you just believe and you put in the work, you'll get it done. And what you're going to be really happy about ultimately is writing something great, writing something that you feel passionate about the concept, you feel passionate about the story. And really, I think it's funny because a lot of times you'll hear people say things like, you know, you write for yourself. Well, not exactly. I mean, you hear a lot of authors say this all the time, and they'll say, you know, I would write even if no one ever read it. And it's like, well, that's not exactly true. I think Robin Williams had an interesting quote at Dead Poet Society where he talked about how all words were meant to woo women or something along those lines, right? And it's not to say that that's why we're right, you know.
Now we know. Okay.
Yeah, but it's just to say that there's you know, you do have audiences in mind. You do want to be read and seen, and it's okay. Like, I think again, it's almost disingenuous how we like in this world to pretend that we don't like attention when really we do. We all like attention. It's human nature to like these things. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that you don't. It's not true to say that you just write for yourself. But I would say, and this is from Stephen King, he talks about how he does have his wife as his that is his target demographic, just his wife, right? And he knows if he writes a great book, a book that she'll love, then again, everything else will fall in line. So, but I would just take that and I would say, okay, you're not writing for yourself because of course you want other people to love and appreciate your work, but I would tweak what he said a little bit. I would say that you have to be your own target demographic, and you do need to be brutally honest with yourself, and you need to be tough in the edits. But in the writing process, you just go full steam ahead. Okay, that's another important distinction: is you keep these two things separate. You don't write and edit at the same time. Again, my opinion. Right. All writers have their own processes, but I'm firm on that. For me personally. Okay.
Right.
And edit at the same time. These are two separate things because it makes it uneven. For instance, like just shrink it down, right, into a poem. Instead of a novel, start even smaller, right? So you have a poem. Well, what happens if I comb over a poem 20 times, but let's say that as I'm writing, I'm combing over that first line, the first few lines, and then I'm combing over. What happens? I've now combed over these first few lines 30 times. But by the time I'm done editing, I've combed over the second few lines 20 times, combed over the 30, you know, the fine 10. All right. So you get unevenness even in terms of how it's been combed over. Okay. Not only that, but you also scale it up. Not only that, but you're going to have now things that you've edited here change the intention of everything else. So everything starts to splinter and fracture because especially if you're a perfectionist, you're going to feel this. Another example, it's the same reason why Steve Jobs, as an example, or even Mark Zuckerberg, they wear the same piece of clothing almost every day. It's because there's decision fatigue, right? And you can get the same thing with your writing as well if you're not careful about it.
That's good. Yeah.
You need to know when you're making decisions and why you're making them. So you don't want to become fatigued with your decisions as you go along. So you need to make sure that if you're making decisions, you're doing it in one smooth process. You have the right energy for it because again, if you start to fracture, then now you have to make 1,000 extra decisions that you didn't even need to make. So you're becoming frayed around the edges. You know what I'm saying? And that's because you're creating all this extra stuff that didn't need to be there. You know, so I don't know if that's making sense. I feel like I kind of just went in a bunch of different directions.
Did you coin that phrase, decision fatigue? Because I've never heard that before.
I don't think so. I'm sure it's somewhere, but I'd love to claim that I coined it. So I coined it.
That one. That's a good one. Okay. What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting that Connor described that because I lived through that with him. I remember particularly one morning I came back in and I said, hey, man, I was before we get started with what we're going to write today, I was reading back over what we wrote yesterday and I want to make a couple of suggestions. He goes, absolutely not. we're not doing that. Once we turn the page, we're only working on how to make today and tomorrow better. We're not looking backwards. We'll deal with that when we get to the end.
You write it down on a notepad somewhere, but you don't change it in the middle of it.
That's exactly what you said. Yeah. And it's like, okay. And I thought, you know what I was about to do there, what got me jammed up all that time ago. I got so fractured with decision fatigue, as you say, and when I wasn't doing it. But I think as far as if you've got a book you want to write, you cannot get into it because, I'm going to do this and make a lot of money, and I'm going to do this and go get famous. You've got to have a story on that you're burning to tell, that you just want to tell, and you're going to sit down and start hammering it out day after day after day. And there was something you said earlier, Kathy, you said, life is short, and boy, are we ever feeling it now. during this era that we're living through. Our time is short. And if there's something that you want to do, you want to learn to play your guitar, you want to dance, you want to sing, you want to write a book, buddy, lady, you better get busy with it. And I'll tell you this, you may fumble your way through it for a while, but it's one of those things that my dad used to tell me. It was like, you better make up your mind what you're going to do and go after something. And he goes, and I'll tell you this, in the Bible, people stop to watch a burning bush. And how much more would they stop to watch and to listen to a burning woman or a burning man with a story? So, time is short. If you got something you want to do, don't get to the end of your life and say, I really wish I'd written that book. Because I've had friends tell me that, when I retire or when I have some time in a couple of years, then I'm going to take a month off and then I'm going to do it. It's like, no, you won't. If it's burning a hole in you, you'll be doing it right now. Like, get started with it.
And that's kind of what COVID has done to us. It's made us stop, be still, and reevaluate things. And I had a woman tell me once, well, if you're ever going to write a book, Kathy, you've got to quit talking, because if you're talking, you're not writing. And I think about that all the time. And if you're talking and you're not listening, you're not learning. So my goal this year is to be a better listener, and spend my time wisely, because we don't know. And I'm telling you, I got a story I want to tell, and I know Echo does too. So I just thank you guys so much for everything that you've done and we're doing together. And I just want to open up the conversation to anybody who wants to jump in and make any kind of questions or remarks to, we've got Kevin and Connor and Echo here. Any comments or anything about the writing process or the storyline, or I'll just open it up.
Well, I'll add I loved what Connor was saying as far as the publishing the old classics, is that old classics for our new generation are ignored because of their size and their boredom. This new generation is a visual generation. I mean, your most popular selling book, are comic books and the comic movies. And you start adding nice pictures to those books and inside of those books. I told Echo a story of my first book report I gave in school was Oh Yeller, and I picked the book out because it had pictures in it. And I was worried I couldn't read the whole book, but I could just look at the pictures and give my book report. So I think our younger generation is going to respond to these old classics where those things would have sat on the shelf and drawn dust for years and they'd have never known them. So congratulations on the idea.
It's a great idea.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, well, it's been a wonderful evening. I am looking forward to 2021. We've got in 9 days our big conference, and it's going to be interesting. I plan on making it fun no matter what happens. We will laugh about it later when we think about the first year we went virtual and online. I'm thrilled to have all of you a part of it. Mandy's been helping me so much behind the scenes, and now Doug is coming on board to help me with the administration of the Zoom meetings. And I've had lots of help from Jonathan Hote at the Pat Conroy Center. And I just think that if we all just work together and hold hands, we're going to get through this time, and we're going to look back on it as probably, we're going to see all the things we gained besides the things that we lost. Because I know I've never worked harder than I have this year in my life. And I'm sure all of you are saying the same thing. I've been watching Mandy do her art, and I'm going, I want to get back working on my art. It's so exciting to see her new creations. And I know, Kevin, you want to get back to being able to photograph, and let's just hope this vaccine comes soon. So I will see all of you Sunday, because we're going to be having our test run with all of our featured authors at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. And tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to be Zooming with the Blue Sky Writers, Marilyn Rothstein, Betty Lee Crosby, many of the authors. I've got it up. I'll be sharing it again. Join me in the afternoon, and I'm going to be checking out the SIBA one that starts before that, Echo. I did see your post, and I did sign up for that. So have a wonderful week. You can get all of these books at, of course, your online booksellers, but Sherry Stonk, who has the Main Street Reads in Somerville, South Carolina, is going to be selling all of our Pulpwood Queen books. All of us have been sending autographed book plates to her. So if you order from her, you're going to get 10%. She'll ship them to you, and they'll be autographed. And our full list is up on our website, www.thepulpwoodqueens.com. If you want to know more about Lucid House Publishing, go to www.lucidhousepublishing.com. We have our submission guidelines. Echo will be there, or any of us, to help answer your questions. And just thank you so much for joining. This is being recorded, and it will be downloaded after we stop onto my Kathy L. Murphy YouTube channel. So please subscribe. All the videos I'm doing are going there, and then you can share them with the world. So thank you, everybody. I love you all. And last note, Spellbound Under the Spanish Moss. Let's take it #1. Yay.
Yay.
Yay. Thank you all. Have a blessed evening, and we'll see you soon. Okay.
Thank you, Kathy. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.